They burned her home for loving the wrong man, but he rode through the fire to remind her, some love is worth the scars. Which moment hit you hardest? The fire or the silence after? They called her a witch, not because she practiced dark magic, but because she dared to love the wrong man. In that small western town where sin and salvation were often decided by rumor, it didn't take much to set a soul on fire. Her name was Evelyn Hart, a woman too gentle for a land so cruel. She had once been the school teacher, the one who read to the children about kindness and courage. But after she fell in love with a cowboy who rode under no man's law, the kindness turned to whispers, and the courage turned to exile. The man's name was Colt Avery, a drifter with eyes like gunmetal and a scar that told stories he'd never speak. They said he'd once shot a sheriff in self-defense. Others said he rode with outlaws. But Evelyn never cared for the stories. She cared for the man who left wildflowers at her doorstep and built her a fence with his bare hands when the wind tore through her garden. He'd come at dusk, always at dusk, smelling of dust and smoke, his hat low, his voice soft as an apology. When he told her he'd leave for a while, to earn enough money to build them a home far from the town that hated them, she believed him. She waited every evening by the window, the lamplight flickering over the little silver ring he'd given her. It wasn't much, just a band shaped from a bullet casing. "So you'll always remember," he had said, "even if I'm gone." But the town remembered too, and not with kindness. That night the wind carried the scent of burning oil before the first spark caught the corner of her cabin. Evelyn was asleep when she heard the glass shatter. She woke to the roar of fire, to men shouting her name with venom in their throats. "Witch!" they cried. "Sin lover!" Someone threw a torch against her door. Someone else laughed. The world turned red. Evelyn stumbled out of bed, coughing, the smoke clawing at her lungs. Her hands fumbled for the little box beneath the floorboard. Letters, a photograph, the ring's twin. She pressed them to her chest, but the heat was faster than memory. Flames licked the curtains, the walls cracked and sighed. She grabbed her shawl, but the hem caught fire. She tore it off and ran for the door, her bare feet blistering against the wooden floor. Outside, the sky was black but glowing, as if the stars themselves had fallen. A circle of men stood near the fence, faces hidden beneath hats, their eyes shining with something darker than hatred. Fear. Because fear was what this town was built on. Fear of change, fear of difference, fear of love that didn't ask permission. Evelyn's voice broke as she screamed, "Why? What did I do?" No one answered. One of them, she recognized him as the preacher's son, spat into the dirt. "You should have prayed instead of laying with a killer." The cabin groaned behind her, the roof caving in with a hiss of sparks. Evelyn backed away, the heat clawing at her skin. Her hair caught embers. She slapped at it with trembling hands, coughing so hard she could barely breathe. Then the men turned away, satisfied with their justice. The fire swallowed her home, her books, the small wooden cross she had carved for her mother's grave. When the last of them left, she sank to her knees, clutching the ring Colt had given her. The metal was hot, burned into her palm, but she couldn't let go. It was all she had left of him. Wind tore through the ashes, and somewhere in the distance she thought she heard a horse. But maybe it was only her mind, the echo of hope refusing to die. She staggered toward the sound anyway, her breath raw, her vision blurred. Each step was a prayer not to God, but to the memory of the man who once promised, "If they come for you, I'll find my way through hell itself. And maybe he would. The night stretched long. Evelyn walked until her legs gave way, collapsing on the frozen ground. Around her the fire still glowed, painting her skin in gold and red. She thought of Colt, his rough hands, his quiet eyes, the way he always looked back before riding away. He had once told her, "If you ever see fire on the horizon, that means I'm coming home." But tonight, the fire wasn't a promise. It was punishment. As she lay there, shivering under the cruel sky, she whispered his name like a prayer lost to the wind. And far away, across the plains where stars faded into smoke, a lone horse answered with a cry. The men in town would tell the story differently come morning. They would say the witch got what she deserved. They wouldn't mention the woman who loved too much, or the cowboy who once swore to ride through hell for her. But the wind would remember. It carried the scent of ash and sorrow north toward a figure galloping hard through the dark. His coat flapped like wings, his eyes burned brighter than the flames ahead. And before dawn, before the town could wake, Colt Avery would see the sky over the ridge, glowing red, and he would know. He would ride faster, through fire, through fear, through everything that once tried to separate them. Because love in the West wasn't written in words. It was written in smoke and blood and the footsteps of those who refused to give up, even when everything they loved was burning. The first thing Colt Avery smelled was the smoke, not the kind that came from campfires or black powder. This was heavier, crueler, thick with loss. He'd been riding since dusk, following the old wagon trail that cut through the pines when the wind shifted and carried that scent straight into his chest. He stopped his horse, a black stallion named Rook, and stared at the horizon. It was bleeding red, the kind of red no sunset ever made. His gut turned cold. He didn't need a map to know where that fire was. He'd built that cabin with his own hands. "God help me," he whispered, then kicked Rook hard and rode. The forest blurred by, branches tearing at his coat, sparks drifting through the dark like dying stars. The closer he came, the louder it got, the crack of timber splitting, the low roar of destruction, the faint echo of a woman's cry. "Evelyn!" He pushed harder. The horse snorted, foam at its mouth, hooves pounding the frozen earth. The sky flickered orange, and in that light he saw it, the town's doing. He didn't need to see the men to know their kind, the righteous with torches, the cowards who prayed loudest after the burning was done. When he reached the clearing, the cabin was already half ash. The flames clawed at the air, wild and hungry. For a heartbeat, Colt froze. Every memory he had with her lived inside those walls. Her laughter by the stove, the smell of wild honey she used in her tea, the way she'd tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear when she was thinking. Now it was all burning. "Evelyn!" he shouted, his voice tearing through the smoke. No answer. He leapt from Rook's back and ran straight into the fire. The heat hit him like a wall. He threw his coat over his head and pushed through, coughing, eyes stinging. The porch collapsed behind him as he kicked open the door. The air was thick with ash, the floor glowing with embers. He looked around, overturned chair, books charred, the box he'd carved her initials into melting into black dust. Then he saw her, or what was left of her shape, kneeling outside the far wall, her hair tangled, her dress torn, trying to drag something from the ashes. "Evelyn!" he shouted. She turned, eyes wide and glassy, barely recognizing him through the smoke. "Colt," she whispered, her voice a ghost. He was at her side in an instant, pulling her up. Her skin was blistered, her hands shaking. She tried to speak again, but the words drowned in her coughs. He wrapped her in his coat, lifting her off the ground like a child. She clutched something in her palm. The ring, burned and blackened. "Hold on," he murmured, pressing his face to her hair. "You hear me? You're safe." She tried to laugh, but it came out as a sob. "You shouldn't have come back." He smiled, the first smile he'd managed in months. "You think hell could keep me from you?" Behind them, the fire screamed. The roof gave way with a violent crack, sending sparks flying like angry stars. Colt shielded her with his body, stumbling through the doorway just as the wall collapsed. They fell to the ground, coughing, gasping, rolling through the dirt until the world stopped spinning. For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind howled, carrying ash across the dark fields. The cabin was gone. Only the stone chimney stood, glowing red like a grave marker. Evelyn stirred first. "Everything is gone. Everything," she whispered. Colt brushed a streak of soot from her cheek. "Not everything." She looked up at him, and in that instant the fire reflected in her eyes, not destruction, but something fierce and alive. She reached for his hand, her fingers trembling. "They'll come for you," she said. "They'll kill you if they know you're here." He glanced toward the town's road, where torches flickered faintly in the distance. "Then they'd better ride fast, because I'm done running." He stood, helping her to her feet. Rook whinnied from the edge of the field, pawing nervously at the ground. Colt guided Evelyn toward the horse, his arm steady around her waist. She stumbled once, and he caught her, gentle, unflinching. "Where will we go?" she asked. He looked north, toward the mountains veiled in smoke. "Somewhere the fire can't reach." When they reached Rook, he lifted her into the saddle and climbed up behind her. She leaned back against him, too weak to hold on, her head resting against his chest. He wrapped one arm around her, the other gripping the reins. As they rode, the wind tore through the smoke, revealing stars again. Evelyn turned her face toward the sky, her lips moving silently. Maybe a prayer, maybe a farewell. Colt didn't ask which. He just kept riding, his eyes fixed ahead where the horizon glowed faintly with the first breath of dawn. Behind them, the cabin burned itself into memory, a pyre for everything they had lost and everything they refused to surrender. When the fire finally died, there was nothing left but silence. But far beyond the hills, two silhouettes rode into the dawn, one broken, one burning, and between them, something stronger than vengeance, something purer than forgiveness, the stubborn, unkillable truth of love. And though the town would wake to ashes and gossip, the wind carried another story, that the outlaw had ridden back through the flames not for vengeance, but for the woman who once believed in him when no one else did. The fire was far behind them now, just a dull orange bruise on the horizon. The night air was cold, sharp, filled with the scent of pine and smoke. Colt rode without speaking, his arm steady round Evelyn, feeling every shiver that ran through her. Her head rested against his chest, her breathing shallow, each exhale a ghost in the wind. They followed no road, only the faint silver line of moonlight across the prairie. The world round them was silent, no crickets, no owls, just the hollow hush that follows destruction. Ever so often, Colt would look back, half expecting to see torches, but there was nothing, only the emptiness that fire leaves behind. Evelyn stirred weakly. "Colt," she whispered, her voice barely a thread. He leaned closer. "I'm here." "I can't feel my hand." He looked down. Her right hand was swollen, red, the ring still clutched between her fingers like a promise she refused to let go. He loosened it gently, wincing as she cried out. "Easy now," he murmured, wrapping her hand in his kerchief. "We'll get you fixed up soon. Just hold on." She smiled faintly. "You said that before, and I meant it then, too." They rode on until the first trace of dawn softened the sky, pale gold brushing the edge of the mountains. The land stretched wide before them, endless and unbroken, the kind of place that didn't care about men or their sins. Colt found an abandoned line shack near the river, the roof half collapsed, but walls enough to keep out the wind. He dismounted and lifted Evelyn down carefully. She tried to stand, but her knees gave out. He caught her before she hit the ground. "You need rest," he said. "I need to go back," she whispered. "They'll think I ran with you. They'll burn more." He shook his head. "There's nothing left to burn." She looked at him then, eyes shining with tears and ash. "You don't know them, Colt. They don't stop until the ashes are cold." "I do know them," he said quietly, "because I used to ride with men like that." The words hung heavy in the air. Evelyn froze, the pain in her face giving way to something deeper, realization. He helped her inside, laying her near the hearth, and set about starting a fire. His hands trembled as he struck the flint. He'd always been steady with a gun, with a lasso, with anything that demanded control, but not this, not her. When the first spark caught, she spoke again, softly. "You never told me what you did before." He sat back, the firelight flickering across his face. "You never asked." "I'm asking now." He stared into the flames. "I rode with Boone's gang out of Abilene. You remember them?" She nodded faintly. "The ones who robbed the stagecoach and left no witnesses?" "Yeah, that was the one. I didn't pull the trigger, but I didn't stop it either. When it was over, I rode north and swore I'd never carry another man's orders again." Evelyn was silent for a long time. The fire crackled, shadows dancing across her burned hands. "You told me you built that cabin for a fresh start." "I did," he said. "I just never expected the past to come knocking with a torch." She reached toward him, her fingers brushing his sleeve. "Colt, you came back for me. That's what matters." He met her gaze, his voice breaking. "I came back because I couldn't let them take the last good thing I ever had." Outside, the river whispered over stones, the sound like a lullaby for the broken. The sky was fully light now, gold spilling through the cracks in the roof. Evelyn's eyes fluttered closed, exhaustion claiming her at last. Colt sat beside her, watching her breathe. The burns on her arms, the blood on her dress, every mark told the story of a woman who'd loved without permission and paid the price. He knew something about that kind of pain. It carved you hollow, then dared you to keep living. He stood and stepped outside. The morning stretched wide and cold. Smoke still hung low on the horizon where the town had been. He could almost hear their voices, the shouts, the lies, the firecrackers of hatred. But for the first time, he didn't feel small against them. He felt certain. Behind him, Evelyn stirred again, murmuring his name. Colt turned, walked back in, and knelt beside her. "Rest now," he said quietly. "We'll move again tonight." "Where?" she asked, half dreaming. He smiled faintly. "There's a valley past the ridge. I used to trap down in the winter. Nobody goes that far anymore." She smiled weakly. "Sounds lonely." It was, until now. Her eyes softened. She reached for his hand again, her fingers trembling, burned, but still alive. "Don't leave me, Colt." He looked down at her, at the woman the world had tried to erase, and said the only truth he had left. "I already did once. I won't make that mistake again." As night fell once more over the prairie, the hunter and the woman who'd lost everything sat side by side, framed by the faint glow of a dying fire. The ashes of their past lay behind them. Ahead, only the road, long and uncertain. But for the first time in years, neither felt afraid of the dark.
By the third night, the wind changed. Colt felt it before he saw the signs. The sudden stillness in the trees, the way the horses pricked their ears, the faint taste of iron on the air. Someone was coming. He'd been sitting by the fire, mending the torn strap of his saddle, when the realization settled in his gut like lead. Evelyn was asleep beside the hearth, her hand wrapped in linen, her breathing steadier now. He studied her for a long moment, the curve of her cheek under the pale firelight, the way her hair fell loose and tangled. There was peace there, fragile as glass. He knew it wouldn't last. Colt rose quietly, stepped outside, and crouched near the edge of the clearing. The moon was high, silvering the grass. In the distance, faint but distinct, came the sound he dreaded most. Hooves. More than one horse, moving slow, deliberate, hunter's pace. He cursed softly under his breath. They'd found their trail. He returned inside, his voice low but calm. "Evelyn," he said gently, shaking her shoulder. "Wake up, sweetheart." She stirred, blinking in confusion. "What's wrong?" "Riders. Maybe 5, maybe 6. They'll be here by dawn." Fear flashed in her eyes. "From town?" "Has to be. I crossed to the small chest where I'd stowed my Winchester, checking the chamber. They won't stop till they think I'm dead, or you." Evelyn pushed herself upright, though her arms trembled. "Then we run." He shook his head. "No. You can't ride far enough in your state, and they'll track us anyway." "Then what will you do?" He met her eyes, steady and unflinching. "Finish what should have been finished years ago." For a long moment she said nothing. Then softly, "You don't have to kill again, Colt." He looked at her, and for a second she thought she saw a flicker of something like sorrow, the kind that lives deep, where words don't reach. "I ain't doing this for revenge. I'm doing it so you can live past sunrise." He loaded his rifle and slung it over his shoulder, then took her burned hand and pressed it to his chest. "Whatever happens, don't come out till it's quiet again. You understand?" Her lips parted, trembling. "And if you don't come back?" He smiled, slow and weary. "Then follow the river south. There's a trading post near San Miguel. Tell 'em Colt Warren sent you. They'll know what to do." She shook her head violently. "No, I won't let you go out there alone." He brushed her cheek with his thumb, voice a whisper. "You already saved me once. Let me return the favor." Then he stepped out into the dark. The night stretched endless across the plains, heavy with smoke and ghosts. Colt moved like part of the earth itself, quiet, unseen. He found a ridge overlooking the narrow pass leading to the cabin. That was where they'd come from. He lay flat against the rocks, rifle steady, eyes scanning the shadows. After an hour, the riders appeared. 5 men, torches low, guns at their sides. He recognized 2 of them even from here, Caleb Haskins, the blacksmith, and Reverend Miles, the same men who'd called Evelyn a witch, who'd watched her home burn without lifting a finger. And there, at the front, rode Boone. Colt's breath caught. Boone, the man he'd once called brother, the one he'd left behind when the gang fell apart, the one who'd sworn years ago that if he ever saw Colt again, he'd finish what the law couldn't. "Damn you, Boone," Colt muttered under his breath.
The men spread out, torches sweeping through the trees. Colt waited until the first one broke off from the group, a thin man with a shotgun and a limp. Then, one clean shot. The man dropped, silent. The others froze. "What was that?" Caleb hissed. Boone raised his pistol, scanning the trees. "He's here." Another shot rang out. Caleb fell backward, torch rolling into the river. Panic erupted, shouting, scrambling, the sound of boots on rock. Colt moved from the ridge, reloading as he went, circling wide like a wolf. He was a shadow among shadows. Boone fired blindly into the trees. "Come on out, brother," he roared. "Let's finish what we started." Colt stepped from behind a pine, rifle steady. "You already finished it, Boone. You just didn't bury it deep enough." Boone spun, eyes wild. "You picked the wrong side, Colt. Always did. You think that girl's worth dying for?" Colt's voice was calm. "She's worth something you wouldn't understand." Boone sneered. "Love? Redemption." Boone raised his gun, but Colt was faster. One shot echoed through the hollow. Boone staggered, looked down at the hole in his chest, and smiled, a crooked smile. "Guess you finally learned to finish a job," he rasped. Then he fell. The silence that followed was the kind that swallowed everything: fire, breath, even thought. Only the wind moved, carrying the smoke east. Colt stood there for a long time, rifle still warm in his hands. Then he turned back toward the shack. His legs felt heavy, each step slower than the last. When he reached the clearing, the fire inside had gone out. Evelyn sat by the door, wrapped in his coat, eyes wide with fear until she saw him. "Colt?" She knelt before her, took her hand, and nodded once. "It's done." Tears filled her eyes, spilling silently. "You're hurt," she whispered, touching his arm. "Not where it counts." They sat there until the stars faded and the first light of dawn spilled across the ashes of the night. The world felt clean again, in that terrible, fragile way things do after fire. Colt looked out toward the river, then back at her. "We can't stay here, but wherever we go next, no one's burning you again. I swear it." Evelyn smiled weakly through her tears. "Then take me home, Colt, even if it's nowhere at all." He helped her to her feet, and together they walked into the sunrise, two souls bound not by the past, but by the fire that hadn't managed to destroy them.
The sun climbed slow that morning, pushing through the thin veil of mist that clung to the valley floor. The air smelled of pine and wet earth, and far below, a river wound like silver through the wilderness. For the first time in days, there was no smoke behind them, no fire, no shouting, no echoes of pursuit, only the hush that comes after a storm when the world seems to hold its breath. Colt and Evelyn rode in silence. His arm, bandaged and still bleeding beneath the sleeve, ached with every movement, but he said nothing. She sat behind him, her cheek resting against his back, her breath soft and steady. The heat of her was real, a reminder that she was alive, that they both were. By midday, the horses slowed to a trot, climbing toward a ridge where a single oak tree grew, its branches gnarled and half-burned from some old lightning strike. Beyond it stretched a broad, open valley, green, quiet, untouched. Smoke from a distant wildfire still curled faintly on the horizon, painting the sky in bands of gray and gold. Evelyn lifted her head, eyes wide. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Colt reined in the horse and looked out across the land. "Yeah," he said softly. "Reckon this is as close to heaven as we'll ever get." They dismounted near the stream that cut through the grass and led the horses to drink. Evelyn crouched beside the water, trailing her fingers through it. For a long moment, she just stared at her reflection, the soot still clinging to her skin, the red mark where the ring had burned into her palm. "I can't even remember what I looked like before all this," she murmured. Colt knelt beside her. "You look the same to me." She turned to him, smiling faintly. "And how's that?" "Like someone who's still fighting to live." He said it without thinking, and it hung between them, soft and heavy as smoke. She looked down, tears glinting in her lashes. "You shouldn't have come back for me, Colt. You could have died." "I know." He watched the water ripple around her hand. But I wouldn't live neither if I hadn't. Evelyn reached for him then, her hand trembling as it brushed his face. The roughness of his stubble, the tiredness in his eyes, it all told her more than words ever could. He'd lost everything once before, and yet here he was, starting over in the ashes. They made camp near the edge of the stream that night. Colt gathered driftwood and lit a small fire. The flames were small, quiet, nothing like the inferno that had devoured her home. Evelyn sat close, wrapped in his coat, humming a tune so faint it seemed to blend with the crackle of the fire. "What song is that?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "One my mother used to sing. Said it was for people trying to find their way home." He looked into the fire. "Reckon that fits." After a long silence, she said, "Colt, what will you do now?" He took a slow breath, staring into the coals. "Used to think I'd ride till the land ran out. Maybe rob enough to buy a grave with my name on it." He looked at her then, eyes softer than she'd ever seen. "Now I figure maybe there's more worth building than burning." Evelyn smiled through her tears. "And where would you build it?" He nodded toward the valley below. "Right here looks good enough. Nobody knows this place. Nobody to tell us who we used to be." They sat in silence again, letting the world breathe around them, the rustle of wind through the grass, the low murmur of the river, the hum of crickets. Everything felt slower, almost sacred. Later, as the stars bloomed across the night sky, Evelyn lay beside him, her head against his shoulder. "Do you think they'll come after us again?" she asked quietly. Colt stared up at the stars. "Maybe. But I'm done running." He turned his head toward her. "You got that ring still?" She opened her palm. The metal was blackened, warped from the fire, but still intact. He took it gently, thumb tracing the scorched edge. "You know," he said softly, "we could start over. Not as the outlaw and the witch, just Colt and Evelyn." She smiled through her tears. "That sounds almost too good to be real." He held her gaze, his voice a whisper. "It's real enough if we make it so." He slipped the ring onto her finger again, imperfect, bent, but true. She looked at it, then at him, and in that moment the past fell away. The mob, the fire, the pain. There was only the crackle of the fire, the rhythm of his breathing, the feeling of being found after a long, hard road. Morning came soft and gold. Evelyn rose first, stepping out into the light. The valley was wrapped in mist, dew sparkling on the grass. She turned back toward the camp, where Colt was saddling the horses, his movements slow but steady. "Where to now?" He looked at her, smiled. "Wherever the trail leads." As they rode out, the valley seemed to open before them, endless, wild, and full of promise. The smoke in the distance had thinned to nothing, leaving only sky. Behind them, the ashes of their old life scattered with the wind. Ahead lay something wordless, not salvation maybe, but peace enough to start again. Colt reached back, found her hand, and held it. Neither spoke. They didn't need to, for in that silence, between the mountains and the rising sun, the outlaw and the burned woman ceased to be ghosts of what they had been. They became something new, something born of fire, loss, and love that refused to die. And as the wind carried the last hint of smoke away, the valley below seemed to whisper their names, not in sorrow, but in forgiveness.